Welcome to the TCM Teach Podcast, the business podcast designed exclusively for acupuncturists, Chinese medicine herbalists who are ready to build thriving, sustainable businesses. I'm Sabey Smith, licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, professor, coach, entrepreneur, and I've spent years helping practitioners like you not only master their clinical skills, but also make smart, grounded business decisions that support long-term stability. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that often feels overwhelming, but is absolutely essential: choosing the right business structure. Whether you're just starting out or considering restructuring as your practice grows, understanding the differences between a sole proprietorship, LLC, PLLC, S-Corp, and other models, this can save you headaches, potentially protect your assets, and even save you money on taxes. So we're going to break that down step by step right after a quick little disclaimer. So please remember, I am simply a practitioner sharing information for educational purposes only. I'm here to help you. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a financial advisor. But what we covered today should not be taken as professional legal or tax advice. However, it could help you get on the road to where you need to go, to consult with the correct professional. So for specific recommendations, I always suggest consulting a qualified professional. So make sure you do that. Thank you. All right, so step one, why does business structure actually matter? So your structure is going to determine a few things. It's going to determine how you're taxed, how much liability protection you have, and your ability to grow, hire, and expand. Now, don't mistake this for malpractice insurance. We will differentiate the two during some episode, I'm sure. We're just talking about your business, the business itself, not necessarily you solely as a practitioner. We're talking about your business entity. So many practitioners start out as sole proprietors by default, and that is not always the best long-term fit, but if you're trying to stay lean and mean, that is an option. This structure can open you up to different liabilities, so you don't have as many protections, but you don't have as many costs to start up as a result. So you could think of your business structure like the foundation of a house. It's kind of what you build everything off of. So you need the right one depending on what you're trying to build. What type of house are you trying to create? So the key takeaway that I want to give you here is your business structure it's not just paperwork. It impacts every aspect of your financial health and your professional security, depending on if you need it and when you need it. So let's go into the common options for practitioners, as well as a couple other options or nuances that you may run into. So we'll start off with the sole proprietorship. The sole proprietorship is usually the easiest to start. There's actually no formal setup required. It's usually just your name. So you and your business are legally the same entity. So there's no separation from you and your business here. It's just you. So there are some pros and cons that I'm going to try to go through with each. So pros here, it's simple, it is minimal cost, and it's easy taxes. It's just pass-through taxation. So basically pass-through taxation is essentially, here's how much you made, and you're going to pay taxes on it. You'll pay your self-employment taxes on it. Pretty straightforward, easy for an accountant. Next, there is the limited liability company. This is probably the most common business setup due to its flexibility as well as its ease of starting out. There are some nuances to this that I am going to mention though. So limited liability company, also known as an LLC. So this creates a separate legal entity from you. So you are not the same as your business. You need to be separate, and your finances also need to show your separation. So what this is going to do, this is going to protect your personal assets from business debts and lawsuits. Now, please keep this in mind, because I had to learn this on my own because, of course, nobody could teach me this. Your personal assets are protected from business debts and lawsuits. And there are more nuances to this that I've had to consult with different lawyers and different resources, which we'll dive into later. But I want to give you the basics for now. A limited liability company is protecting you and your assets regarding the business. This is different from malpractice insurance. Malpractice insurance is the type of thing that protects you if you have malpractice, if you make a mistake. A limited liability company kind of covers you for everything else. So please consult with lawyers on this one as well. But basically, the LLC is protecting you from business debts and lawsuits. So you, as long as this is not under your malpractice, as long as it's not you malpracticing, you're separating your personal assets, yourself, from potentially owing money that if the business were to owe any debts or go into any type of lawsuit. So different from you personally as a practitioner, and there are some nuances to this, so it does give you more protection. So there are several ways to be taxed as an LLC. So you can choose how you're taxed. So the default is as a pass-through entity. So this essentially rolls into your own income. So with the LLC as a pass-through entity, you're just paying similar to an S-Corp. So this is something you work on with your accountant about. What's unique about LLCs is you can elect to be taxed as an S-Corp. So what's different about being taxed as an S-Corp is your business is taxed and you personally are taxed. So there are some nuances here where if you're going to make a certain amount of money and you pay yourself through your business, not through owner's draws like you may as just a single member LLC, but if you give yourself regular paychecks because your business income is predictable enough, your S-Corp is going to get taxed, and then you yourself are going to get taxed on your income. If you're making enough, this could lead to tax savings. If you're not quite at the point where you're making enough yet, you may actually be spending more money than you need to. So this is something really good to talk to an accountant about. So what are the pros and cons to an LLC? So the pros are liability protection and flexibility. Again, pass-through entity or S-Corp taxation. Cons, it does cost more to maintain. So you have state fees, paperwork. Depending on what type of business you are, if you sell any products, make sure you have to get your sales tax certificates if you're in a state where that applies. You just have to be careful and make sure you keep a separate business bank account. Don't cross your personal with your business bank account. The one thing I want to mention that is not very well taught, I've noticed, is there's LLCs and there's PLLCs. So PLLCs are essentially the same thing. It's called a professional limited liability company. So most of the same things apply here. However, a PLLC is related to a license. So a license of some sort. So if you're practicing, for example, acupuncture, some states will allow you to practice under an LLC. Some states will require you to set up a PLLC instead, and your business can only function as whatever the license allows you to do. So a PLLC, the scope of the business is what your scope is on your license. So you have to make sure that you check with the state, do I need a PLLC or can I work as a LLC? So make sure you differentiate the two because it's not always that obvious and I feel like it's not taught very well. Again, this is useful to have a lawyer in whatever state you're practicing in, or if you're a multi-state entity. So if you set up an LLC and you want to say you live in an area where you could easily be in multiple states or like 2 states and you want to practice between the two, you could, if one state allows an LLC and the other requires a PLLC, you have to check to make sure those regulations make sense. So if you're in a state next to another state and they both allow you to function under an LLC, then usually you have nothing to worry about. You just register accordingly and you could talk to your lawyer about that. However, if one state requires a PLLC and you only have an LLC, then you're not going to be able to cross state lines unless you have the separate entity as a PLLC. So this is the type of restructuring you have to talk about with a lawyer. I don't want to overcomplicate it for this introduction, but I at least want to make you aware the nuances add up quickly. And we will touch on these over time. So that was LLC versus PLLC. PLLC is still a limited liability company. It just has the P in front of it, professional limited liability company, because it's connected to your license. Okay, next. I talked about S-Corp taxation, but now we're going to talk about an S corporation. So subchapter S corporation. So this is not necessarily a type of business. It's a tax status you can elect, which you can have as an LLC. It requires paying yourself a reasonable salary, but allows profits to be distributed as dividends. So what does this mean? You can lower your self-employment taxes, but you have to be making enough money for this to make sense. So this is what I was trying to say. If you own an LLC and you elect S corporation status, then you essentially take a reasonable salary from the business that's predictable. So you have to be making enough to predict what you're going to make. And profits are distributed as dividends. So what this does, it lowers your self-employment tax rate because the business gets taxed and you yourself only get taxed on what you made from the company. So instead of a pass-through entity, you're not being taxed on everything that the LLC made. So if you're making enough, it could potentially save you on taxes. So some of the pros of this, again, potential tax savings, and it gives you credibility as you grow. Most of the time, you have to be making a good amount where everything is predictable. So usually people don't start off with this election. Some cons to this are there are more rules. There is more strict bookkeeping. So you're going to want to have an accountant taking care of this for you. And you need to have payroll setup required. So that's what you need to have an S-Corp or subchapter S corporation, or have S-Corp status. So just to clarify, you can be an S corporation and you can have an LLC that is taxed as an S-Corp. I know that can be a little confusing, but this is why you get a lawyer and an accountant involved on your team. Okay, next. So we have a C-Corp. This is a traditional corporation. This is probably not going to happen if you're a small clinic. This is for a very large, picture like a hospital chain. Could be a C-Corp. This is rare for small clinics, but it's useful if you plan to seek investors in the public market. I don't foresee this really happening for a lot of acupuncturists, but it's not impossible. There's always possibility for anything to happen. So just understand it's subject to double taxation. The company itself gets taxed, and then people themselves get taxed. Again, this is why you have accountants and lawyers in case I accidentally messed up and gave you the wrong information, but generally this is how I've understood it. So pros, attractive to outside investors and unlimited growth potential. LLCs can have investors too, by the way. And cons, complex, expensive, unnecessary for most acupuncturists. So I really wouldn't worry about a C corporation. There is another example. If you're interested in nonprofit or setting up a nonprofit, you could have what's called a nonprofit setup. So a 501c3 corporation. That is going to be a nonprofit corporation where essentially you get 5% of whatever the nonprofit makes but this is very complicated, and I honestly don't even think it's worth diving into right now because nonprofits have very strict rules, but it is a way to apply for grants, for nonprofit grants. But we could spend several episodes just talking about nonprofits. I don't want to dive into nonprofits right now. I feel like it's already as complicated enough as it is. Okay, so key considerations when choosing. Most of you listening to this are probably going to be thinking sole proprietor or LLC, or if it's required in your state, PLLC. Liability protection. How much risk are you exposed to? Do you own a home or significant asset you want protected? If you don't, you might be safer as a sole proprietor. That's fine. You could still set up an LLC. If you have significant assets like a home, you probably don't want to function as a sole proprietor because that actually could be at risk if you were to get sued as a business, as a sole proprietor. So with taxes, would you benefit from S-Corp election, or is pass-through simpler at your income level? Most of you listening to this are probably just going to want to have pass-through entity. Until you're making a significant amount of money, you just want to stick to pass-through entity, but you can still talk to your accountant about this. So with future growth, do you plan to be solo or eventually hire associates, build a clinic, or expand online? You can still do all of this as an LLC. An LLC is probably the most flexible option you can have, or PLLC, but the PLLC is still going to be more strict because of the professional limited liability connections involved. So just pay attention, talk to your lawyer, talk to your accountant about this. This is why I can't stress enough how important these professionals are. They are hired for a reason. So cost and maintenance. Some states have high LLC fees or franchise taxes, and it's important to know before deciding. And different states offer different amounts of protection, so you want to do your research ahead of time. Flexibility. An LLC with S-Corp election gives the best of both worlds, but may not be necessary if you're first starting out. You don't want to end up paying too much just starting out. All right, so with the TCM perspective, if we were to structure this as a container for qi, in TCM, the body needs the right channels to move qi effectively. Business structure is like the container. It's the thing that allows your practice's energy to flow safely with purpose. A weak container, like a sole proprietorship or has no protection, it can create some energy leakage, which we don't want. We don't want our qi to leak out of us. A well-built container, like an LLC or an S-Corp, allows your business to grow without draining your personal resources. So that could be really nice because the key distinction I want to give you here, especially if you're an LLC, PLLC, having a separate bank account from your personal bank account. If you cross those paths, if you take a payment, say you use Square or whatever EHR, and you put it to your personal bank account, this is something you really should never do. But if you do, there's basically no point in having an LLC because you break something what's called the corporate veil. So once you break the corporate veil, it makes it look like the LLC didn't matter and it didn't exist. So now all your personal assets are going to be at risk as a result. And you don't want that to happen. So separate bank account. So you have an employee identification number, and that's what you get from the IRS. You have your LLC set up through a lawyer, preferably. You have an accountant ready to work with you. They don't have to do all the bookkeeping for you. They can, but there's a couple formalities you need in place to have your LLC or PLLC, whatever your state requires. So just make sure you understand that. You don't want to cross your personal and business finances. That can become a big, big problem. Okay, common mistakes that practitioners make. Staying sole proprietor for too long. This is what leaves your personal assets vulnerable. Okay, if you don't have personal assets, that's a bit of a different story. However, it's really not that hard to create an LLC or a PLLC, whatever it may be, because you're going to save a lot of money in the long run in the event your business is sued. This is really just about protecting yourself. If you have a house, it shouldn't even be a question. If you have significant assets, it shouldn't even be a question that you need to have some type of formal entity set up. And a lawyer would be able to advise you on this further. You don't want to just choose based on taxes. So you don't want to ignore liability protection or your growth needs. If you're a solo practitioner who intends to hire other practitioners pretty soon, you're not going to want to function as a sole proprietor, because everything that your employees do under you, you're not even a sole proprietor anymore. Everything they do puts your whole business at risk, which could put your personal assets at risk. So if you're at least an LLC or PLLC, it's a lot more common to have employees that way. And you don't want to do this alone without guidance. Oh my goodness. Do not do this alone without guidance. I'm giving you the intro, but get a professional to set these things up for you properly, because missing key paperwork or failing to file annual reports, those can really stack up. Those fees stack up, penalty fees. In the event you are sued, you do not want to be in a situation where you found you were missing something. Do not do that. Just because it's cheaper does not make it better or safer in the long run. It's actually the opposite. So another one is not revisiting your business structure and the idea that it can evolve. So the structure that worked at 50,000 revenue is probably not going to serve you if you're making 200,000 revenue. This is something you want to talk to an accountant about. Where are my tax advantages going to take place the most? So I want to give you some practical steps that you can take now. Write down your current business structure. Or if you don't have one, now is a good time to start. Evaluate your protection. Are your personal assets safe? And there is one nuance I want to give you here. If you owe money to debtors personally, setting up an LLC after those debts are owed is not going to protect those assets at risk. So for example, you have a $400,000 house and you already have debts and you're already being chased by a creditor because you owe personal debts. If you were to set up an LLC now and try and protect your house, it's not going to protect those assets, your house asset, because you already owe money to a creditor. So what you really likely would hear from an accountant is get the creditor off your back by paying them, so that way you don't owe anything, then set up the entity to protect your home. So again, that's when you want lawyers and accountants involved. So are your personal assets safe? Do you have personal assets that need to be safe? So even if it's a question, be on the safe side. Review your revenue goals. Would an S-Corp save you taxes at your level? So this is what you want to talk to your accountant about. Hey accountant, how much do I need to be making where I should be an S-Corp election in my LLC, for example? And they'll be able to tell you that. And I actually wrote this down here to consult a professional, but you've heard me say that already so many times. So schedule a call with an accountant or small business attorney. They are indispensable. They are very much worth their time. You just need to go prepared with questions. And then decide on next steps. Keep it simple if you're just beginning, but plan for upgrades as you grow. Do not keep taking money from the business right away to pay your bills. Make sure you're set up in a way that you're going to be able to scale as necessary to hit the goals you want. So what is the ripple effect of choosing wisely? This is going to protect your personal life and assets, like your home, for example. It's going to create confidence. Patients, banks, and partners are going to take you more seriously as a result, especially when you have a proper entity formed. It positions you for better growth, so adding associates, opening a second location, or expanding online does become easier and saves you money long-term by reducing unnecessary taxes and risks. So this is a very brief overview of different corporations that you want to think about, or different business structures, I should say, that you want to think about before you move forward with your business plan. If you're already working as a sole proprietor or LLC or PLLC, whatever it may be, That's perfectly okay. Make sure that everything is in line with your goals and where you're moving forward as you continue your journey. So I just have some things I want to leave you with here. Choosing the right business structure, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. That's why we have professionals. Think of this as creating the proper container for your practice's chi. The right structure is going to protect you, it's going to support your growth, and ensures your energy is flowing toward healing and abundance, not stress and worry. The last thing we want is to be a bunch of liver chi stagnation driven practitioners who end up with horrible spleen chi deficiency because of liver overacting on spleen all the time. That's not going to be very fun. That's not going to help anybody. So what I've done is I've created a resource called the Business Structure Comparison Chart. And this is something that's going to lay out the differences between the sole proprietorship, LLC, and S-Corps. This is simple to read, practitioner friendly, and you can see it inside the membership. Just understand that LLC and PLLC, that is very state specific. So make sure you consult a professional on that one. I simply broke it down into sole proprietorship, LLC, S-Corp, C-Corp. Okay. So in our next episode, we're going to be talking about insurance, liability, and protecting yourself as a practitioner. So until then, thanks for tuning in to the TCM Teach Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.